So in continuation to what we were saying before, and we touched upon this point as well as during the warrior to warrior class, there are different paradigms in which the Torah advises us on a conventional level how to address trauma and what we call personal destruction, as we mentioned before, from even on the most conventional level, even towards the animal soul. As Rabbi Akiva is the one that teaches, Kol man da'avid l'rachmana, anything that the merciful one, Hashem, does, he does for the good. In other words, and as we discussed in the class, this paradigm teaches us that although right now things may not look good, they might not feel good, even on a Torah level, but that doesn't, God forbid, detract from the very fact that ultimately is going to bring good. Because in Hashem's world, and as the Alter Rebbe teaches, evil does not descend from heaven. Negativity and bad things do not descend from heaven. A good God does not do bad things. And it doesn't bring bad things upon us. Yes, we're human beings in a corporal body with an animal soul, etc., and therefore sometimes we are thrown off by what we visually see and experience. But that's just because the limitation of the corporality and the animal soul, the ego. It doesn't, God forbid, mean that ultimately something is negative. Because in Hashem's world, there's no such thing as negativity. However, from Rabbi Akiva's perspective, everything that Hashem does, he does it for the good. Which means that right now it might not feel good and seem good, but ultimately, Hashem is only doing this for something ultimately good. There's a very famous letter from the Rebbe, and we discussed this several times. In addressing how could bad things happen to good people, the Rebbe brings a parable of a primitive person from, let's just say, 5,000 years ago, who somehow manages to walk into a modern day operating theater while an operation is in progress. Being that this person is unaware of medicine, doctors, etc., into his eyes, he sees 4 or 5 masked men standing over this helpless victim who is tied up to a gurney, to a bed. And these 5 masked men are ripping into this person and cutting into him, and they're taking their time. And in his mind, they're sadists. How could you be so cruel? Why would you do this? But if you take this person aside and explain to him that there's what's called modern medicine, and this is a discipline that allows the doctors to treat a patient, and this is what's called an operation, that the patient himself paid top dollar to be able to have in order to save his life. And yes, while the temporary setting may look like he is being cut and so on and so forth, but this is temporary in relationship to the benefits that are going to come out because of this. So right now it doesn't look good, and it doesn't even feel good because this person cannot be active, he's not with his family, he's not in his work, he's not doing what he needs to be doing. But there's no other way to be able to get to where he needs to in a healthy manner without this operation. So ultimately, while this might not feel good, per se, what's that called, the anesthesia? Oh man, that's a whole entire story by itself. It's like the best sleep ever.
funny. That scares me.
Even though I win?
But nevertheless, this is what Rabbi Akiva explains. Kol man da'avid rachman da'avid lotav. Everything that Hashem does ultimately will result in goodness. So let's take it back to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the saddest day of the calendar thus far. But that's because on the topical layer, it looks like everything is discombobulated. But again, in Hashem's world, there cannot be discombobulation. Especially when we learned the concept of divine providence. And especially when we learned on Shabbos, and we discussed this in the last class, in meditation class, that the Baal Shem Tov's teaching of Hashgacha Pratit is not just that everything happens by divine reason and by a divine reason, but for a divine reason as well. What's the difference? By divine reason means, like we learned many times, the fact that right now these leaves are swaying backwards and forwards, whatever direction, that's divine providence.
So it's like predetermined for you, right?
Well, Hashem himself is actively involved in the movement of every single one of those leaves.
Right.
And therefore there must be a divine reason for it. Whether or not we could discern it, whether or not it makes sense, nevertheless, in Hashem's world, everything is by divine providence. But by the Baal Shem Tov's Hashgacha Pratit, there's one more, and this is the apex, this is the top of the line, which is it's for a divine purpose. Which means that the fact that these leaves are moving one way or another is not just because it's divine providence, but as the Baal Shem Tov teaches, the movement itself completes Hashem's desire for creating the world. How? I don't know. But Hashem knows. In as much as we said before that the farmer who is plowing his field understands full well that the plowing and the harvesting are one and the same. You can't have one without the other. You can't get to a harvest if you didn't begin by plowing. From Hashem's perspective, every single movement has an ultimate purpose. From our perspective, well, we don't understand. We don't see. There is a parable that's given. A person who witnesses divine providence in motion. He comes to a field and he sees a beautiful field of wheat. Stalks of stalks, thousands of hundreds of thousands of stalks of wheat. And he says, wow, this is beautiful. Comes along the farmer and starts plowing it. He says, what is he doing this for? And somebody tells him, hold on, just wait. He sees he collects it. He says, okay, so he collected the wheat. And then he sees, what does he see done the next step? The wheat is brought into a asylum. Am I saying it right? Asylum? Where they store the wheat. So okay, they store it for safety. But then he sees that the farmer takes it out and pummels it, and a mill, and he crushes it. He says, why are you destroying this? This is good stuff. And then he says, oh, because we're making flour. And then you know what's the next step. Then somebody buys it. And then he adds it, and this, and think about when you make challah. You ever thought about challah? Imagine you're the challah. Imagine you're the challah. First, you're kneaded over and over, and like, and then you're allowed to, you grow a little bit, and then somebody comes again, and then you will say, okay, could I add enough? I had enough. You grow a little bit more, and you seem like you've overgrown the bowl, and somebody comes and puts you right back and like needs you again. And he says, how much more? I've already dealt with it so many times. I've been cut, I've been pummeled, I've been broken, I've been twisted, I've been this and this. And then that's not enough. Then shapes it up. Okay, I'm shaping it to something. What's next? Thrown into the oven. Imagine you're the challah. What would you feel? Imagine you're the grain of wheat. What would you feel? It's how we usually feel during the rest of the year. But there is a discipline to this madness. There is a divine will. And therefore, in Hashem's world, no matter what it looks like now, it will ultimately lead to the ultimate good. And so from Rabbi Akiva's perspective, and again, that's we said before, the Shittuseo, like the Rebbe always, when teaching about the Mishnah, this rabbi, the Rebbe always focused on the rabbi and his approach to life. So Rabbi Akiva, who came from Sisra, who came from converts, who at 40 years old only began his learning. He went to a cheder with 3-4-year-olds to learn Aleph Bet. And he was mocked. And then he was sent away by his wife for 12 years, and upon coming back, he overheard her says to a friend, if he would come back now, I would send him for another 12 years. So he didn't even knock on the door. He went right back. Rabbi Akiva is the one that the Mishnah said, that the Midrash tells us that when Rachel, who was Kalba Savua's only daughter and only remaining family member, when she saw Akiva, who was in charge of her father's properties, he was his property manager, and he was very successful. He was an amazing property manager. She saw within him a leader. And she tried to convince him to start learning it, to take up leadership, and he was very hesitant. So what does she tell him? She tells him that you must rise to leadership. He says, but what's the point? You see where we're holding in history right now. You saw the destruction. What's the point of now? And what does she tell him? She tells him, imagine you were a Jewish couple, a Hebrew couple, 60 years into the slavery in Egypt, where it was getting darker and gloomier, more painful, where Paro, in his madness, starts cutting babies in half and drains their blood into the Nile so he could bathe in it in order to alleviate what his stargazer told him would help him alleviate his tara'at. So Rabbi Akiva says, what's the point? You see the destruction. And what she says, imagine you're this couple. In your mind, there's several hundred years left before this ends, because we were told 400 years. One of the reasons Pesach is called Pesach, because Hashem passed over, he leaped over his own accounting and took us out after only 86 years of slavery and 210 years into our sojourn in Egypt. But Rachel tells Rabbi Akiva, like only a woman sees, Bina Yisera Nisna Be'isha Yosabi Me'ish. An extra measure of Bina was endowed to a woman. He says, imagine you're that couple. What's the point of having children at this point? What's the point of bringing helpless children? They were going to be cut into pieces. Which makes sense. But she says each and every one of us is a link in a chain. And if that couple would have stopped, would have not brought children, then that chain would have been broken. In other words, yes, right now it's painful, but we have a journey to go to. We have a journey, and we must get to where we need to get to. So although the current situation might seem negative, but it only seems that way. In Hashem's world, nothing could be truly negative. Hashem does not create brokenness. Hashem does not create broken people or broken lives. If something seems broken, then as we're learning now, it's only an invitation to fix on a greater level. It's not a side point. It's not if I didn't have this and this and that in my life, then surely, but just the opposite. It is absolutely vital for the right now to be able to deal with it. But how do we deal with it? So up till now we saw that in order to create a whole, in order to produce light on a whole different level, sometimes we have to be able to remove what was thus far. Otherwise, we're not growing, we're just developing. And it's painful, it's not easy. It's not easy. But when you're seeing it from a divine perspective, there's no room for despair. Just the opposite. As we said before, the Rebbe told Eli Wiesel, why should I teach you how to cry when I can teach you how to sing? Instead of tears, we could laugh. Very interesting, on a parenthetical note, it occurred to me not too long ago that I had several major accidents in my life that brought me to whatever, Baruch Hashem, I live. But the first one is when I cut my hand when I was 7 years old, when I fell down the roof and it severed all my artery in my hand and my and everything in there. And the second time was 3 years later, when a steel door fell upon me and crushed my leg and my spleen. Both times, out of nowhere, when I climbed back on the roof, like over the fountain of blood just coming out of me. You know, this fountain of kindness, and this was a fountain of blood. And when the door fell on me, when everything was severed, I didn't feel anything. I was just crying because of the shock of the blood. But the second time, I certainly was, Baruch Hashem, very painful. But both times, something came into my mind. It was the thought, I wonder if I could stop crying right now and just start laughing. I don't know why, but both times. And both times I stopped crying and I just started laughing. The first time it was easier because it wasn't painful. The second time, it was so much pain that I had no choice other than to laugh. But it's very interesting because it taught me something about life. No matter how painful things may be, you could choose whether you want to spend your time crying or you could laugh. It's a choice. We realize this by default. It's natural to cry when things hurt, right? But who says you have to be natural? But then it occurred to me, I remember learning a story where on the way to America, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was found on the floor next to his bed. He fell off and he couldn't get up. And there was a doctor on board who came into the Rebbe's room and saw him, but he saw him laughing. And later on, first he apologized to the Rebbe. The Rebbe asked him, why are you apologizing? He says, because I'm probably the reason why you fell. He says, how do you figure? He says, because the Torah says that Hashem never puts you in a place where the solution is not already available before the dilemma. So the fact that Hashem allowed you to fall is because I'm a doctor, I'm bored. So if I wouldn't be here, you probably wouldn't. Hashem wouldn't have made me fall. But then he asked the Rebbe, why did you laugh? And the Rebbe explained. And parenthetically, I'll say the second. He says the Rebbe laughed because when judgment comes down, as we learned before, it's only there for a reason. As the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 26 and 27 of Tanya, when judgment comes down, when Gvura comes down, it's only to cleanse. And it's actually even higher than Chesed. It lifts us up much higher. But as we learned in the Farbrengen 2 weeks ago, there's two ways to be able to deal with this Gvura. One in its raw form, when it comes down, is very intense. Very intense. And yeah, it throws us off and we become upset and sad and this and that. And that's natural. But ultimately, we know it's for our good. Or there's, as Hasidus explains, to be mamtik the gvuras, to sweeten the judgment before it comes down here. In other words, to draw the same type of energy, but in a way that we could absorb it. Sort of rain could fall, teeping drop by drop. And what's the virtue of that? In that as it drops, the ground is able to absorb it and it has a positive effect. Or it could fall in one puddle from the ground, but then everything's going to be overwhelmed. How do we sweeten the gvuras? How do we sweeten the judgment? When it comes, laugh. Laugh. Because then that transforms that same energy into acceptable energy. Energy that flows into us, not overwhelms us. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, and that's why I was laughing. Because the Rebbe is a Rebbe, so anything that happens to the Rebbe is because it's meant for all of Bnei Israel. Because the Rebbe is the head of the Jewish people. The head is not just aware of everything, but it has a control and it has feedback from the entire body and sends feedback to and signals to the entire body. So anything that happens to the Rebbe is because that's happening to the nation. So when the Frierdiker Rebbe fell on the way to America, it says this was a decree, but I needed to sweeten it by laughing. There's a similar story with a second Chabad Rebbe, the Mitter Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber. Once he was watching his son ride a horse, and he fell off the horse, and it seems like he was visibly injured. The Mitter Rebbe immediately summoned his a cappella. He had a group of young Hasidim, young men who would just sing. And he started singing the a cappella, the famous Nigun, and he tells him more and happier and this and this and everybody was like, some people didn't understand. Your son is on the floor. He has a visible injury, and you're singing. Mm-hmm. So he explains the same exact nekuda. There was a decree on my son, and in order to sweeten it, we have to be joyful and happy. So sadness in desperate times, in overwhelming times, is natural. But who says we have to be natural? And especially in that being sad and more frustrated and more, or chas v'shalom, angry or anything, only might serve as intensifying the gvuras. And therefore they come even harder, and like a person's like, I don't know what else, I don't know where to run, I don't know where to go, and but that's the point. So then it occurred to me in both situations, with my hand and with my leg, these were both life-threatening situations. With the hand, I lost a tremendous amount of blood, and the very fact that I even made it alive, this was a miracle. When my leg was crushed, it wasn't just my leg, the door fell all the way to my chest and crushed my spleen. And so both were situations where, but I guess Hashem put it into my head to start laughing at that point. And that's a great point when you think about it. Why cry when you could laugh? How is it going to help? This is what Rabbi Akiva was laughing about. He says, well, if this is happening, then what it says, Biglar lachem biglalchem Tzion kitzader ticheresh. As we said before, the prophecy says, and therefore because of you, Tzion will be plowed like a field. Because of you. You did this. You ignored all the warnings. You allowed this to happen, and so on and so forth. And it's happening. That's the topical. But even in such a situation, it's only in order to remove what was and in order to start something altogether magnificently greater than was ever imaginable thus far. And that's why he says he was laughing.
But he had the prophecy. We don't have
He didn't have prophecy. He relied on the prophecy.
He relied, but
the fact that
it was a prophecy.
the fact that the Talmud teaches us this is our Torah. Torah comes from Torah, instruction, and especially in conjunction or in connection with the destruction, to see the destruction to that level. The Torah is teaching us how to view it. How to deal, how to respond to destruction on a global level and on a personal level. This is such a game changer. This is revolutionary. Because even in the most highest of psychology, what do they say? You have to have treatment, you have to see a shrink, there's meds, you're this and that, and it's going to take years to get over this trauma. But when you're looking at it from Hashem's perspective, what trauma? In as much as it's not traumatic, it might be, one of the most, I don't know how else to say it, and maybe it's because of lack of caffeine at this point. My ADD is kicking in. But perhaps the most freakiest, what was that called, that experiment? Finding, I'm sorry, my head.
Discovery.
Not discovery. When they did, they run the most freak. I don't know. I'm just gonna skip. I'm not gonna skip it. The freakiest thing I've ever seen is that lettuce feels itself being chewed, and it literally lettuce feels itself being chewed, and it like literally screams. And not only that, I sent last week a thing that my son sent me, that trees, when one tree, the trees communicate amongst each other, and when one tree is being chopped down, it sends messages to the other ones.
Really?
Yes.
Through the roots, right?
Through the roots, they communicate through the roots. It's like a whole network.
The whole network.
And so imagine the lettuce, go veggie. Those veggie people, they think they're murderers just as much. But in reality, imagine it's a vegetable. Imagine this kernel of wheat that just grew, and like a field of barley, I feel like beautiful, it's nice, and they're swaying back and forth, and you cut down and pummeled it, and then on top of this you're kneaded, and then on top of that you're thrown into the oven. It's like, okay, now I can relax. No, now you're going to be chewed up. So at what point, you said, at what point?
When is it going to stop?
But there's no other way to grow. There's no other way to get to where you need to without this process. It's impossible. You could remain a stalk of wheat. What good is it? You could remain kernels, or a flour, or even a dough, or even a challah. But what good is it unless you reach your apex? And this is the only way. The only way to get to where you need to go to is to go through the process. Therefore, at no point could you say this is bad. It might hurt. It might be difficult, unconventional. Yes, yes, and yes. But bad? No. Not at all. The Alter Rebbe, in a very famous letter, teaches in the Tanya that anyone who gets upset saddened, or anything like this because of worldly events demonstrates a lack of emunah in Hashem. Because if one has true faith in Hashem, and faith by definition means it doesn't make sense. Not intellectual and not emotional sense. I cannot make any sense of it. And nevertheless, I accept it as being from Hashem. And if it's from Hashem, it has to be good. So if a person gets sad and upset, complains, dejected, rescinded, or whatever it is, that's not coming from a place of faith. That's natural to the animal soul, to the ego, but not to the godly soul. And the process in itself counts. That's another very important point. Not just counts in the way that Hashem needs us to do a challah, but the way we go about our process. Yeah, there are ups and downs, and it doesn't always work out. We know that. It doesn't always work out. But as we said towards the end of the first part, Hashem takes every movement as a final process, a final product. As one of the teachings of the Ger Rebbe, Yagaiti velo matzati al ta'amin, Yagaiti lo yagaiti umatzati al ta'amin, but Yagaiti umatzati ta'amin, if I exerted myself and I found, believe it. The Ger Rebbe explains, what do I find if I exert? What do I find if I exert? I find the beauty of the process, of the exertion. That the exertion in itself is absolutely valuable. I thought of something, I made it a reel once. Just because you fail, you think you failed, doesn't mean you didn't succeed. What's the meaning of success for you? Or something to that. Because we often focus on the product. The product is Hashem. Hashem decides the product, how things are going to work out. Hashem causes, and Hashem decides the product. We must focus on the process. And the process in itself is holy. And yes, the process hurts, and you're needed, and you're crushed, and you're pummeled, and you're pushed down again, and you're pushed down. And just as you thought you escaped the bowl, you're pushed right back into the bowl. And it never ends. It never ends. But that's a process. We could make a proverbial l'chaim at this point.
Exactly, yeah.
That's it.
You know, if you remember several years ago, I think it was the last Olympics. I'm not a fan of the Olympics. It's a travesty it's a real travesty.
Yes.
On a parenthetical level, on a religious level, on a Jewish level, the fact that Jews are a part of the Olympics is such a...
Wait, why?
Why? Because the Olympics were made by the Greeks to worship the body
Right.
and the human skill. I could become a god. It's like imagine the Maccabees seeing one day we're going to be participating. But nevertheless, from everything that's in this world, there's what to learn, and it's the service of Hashem. And I believe it was in the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, the last one I think it was, where the race, two of the competitors bumped into each other, the American and I forgot the second one. But the American bumped into another, very strong, very hard. The American got up fairly quickly while the other one really got hit. And it looked like he knocked him down. The race is a race, you gotta get there. The judges don't care why you stopped, you stopped. The American walked up to the other one who was still on the ground, picked them up, and then held them for the duration of the race. And they made it together. Obviously not the first, not the second, not the third. But the judges took that episode into consideration and awarded them both the medal. If these are human judges, how much more so? If judges of flesh and blood, how much more so the Supreme King of all kings? Hashem understands where He puts us. And Hashem understands the settings, our strengths, our limitations. And yet, we can't always get it right. We do our best, but we can't always get it right. But Hashem definitely takes into consideration every part of the process. And because of that, this ultimate discovery should be how beautiful the process is. Make sense? Any questions? So now we could understand how is it possible that we deem Tisha B'Av and Moed a holiday. Like Rabbi Kiva teaches us to look at it correctly, Tisha B'Av is not just, God forbid, a day of destruction. The Talmud teaches us, and the Midrash and Eicha Rabbah also, but the Talmud gives us a very interesting episode. One of our sages was walking in Israel when the Beit HaMikdash was set ablaze. And he walked by an Arab farmer, or a non-Jewish farmer, next to his cow. And the cow mooed. And the guy tells the sage, the cow just said that your holy temple has been set ablaze and it's going to be destroyed now. And then the cow mooed again. And the sage says, what did he say now? He says, he just said that your Mashiach was just born. The very second the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Mashiach was born. In other words, once the field was plowed, now begins a new harvest. And it's one process, one coin. There's no interruption between the two. It's not like now that it was destroyed, now we have to rebuild. No. The only reason it was destroyed is to build bigger and better, but not like the other one did, just by as a motto, but to actually build. In the time we're in Golus, it's very difficult to see this, and especially in the last moments of Golus, of exile. Very difficult. We are after October 7th. The hostages are there 311 days. Or 12 days at this point. Iran is threatening this and that. But the reality is Hashem is in charge. But what do we see? We see the topical. It's so difficult to see beyond that because after all, we're blind. We don't see the truth. We see what our eyes allow us to see, what our egos is comfortable to see, whether it's positive or negative. But it's very interesting because the Midrash tells us that when Mashiach will come, all the korbanot will cease, with the exception of Mizmor LeTodah. I'm sorry, not Mizmor LeTodah, with the exception of the Korban Todah, the Todah offering, the gratitude offering, the thank you offering. And that's because They learn that, Ashalom lach todot lecha. I will pay you with my gratitude. Comes the question, how are we going to give the Korban Todah when the Korban Todah is usually offered after going through negativity, after a hard time, after extreme sickness, or being in a perilous situation, in a dire straits situation? When Mashiach will come, there's no negativity, there's no sickness, there's no danger. Why will we continue giving the Korban Todah? The Midrash says, we'll be thanking Hashem for the Golus. When Mashiach, and I just posted this the other day, there's a Sikha from 1983 Hoshana Rabbah. And the Sikha, his translation on it, the Rebbe was crying so bitterly. The Rebbe says, how much darker could he get? The Shekhinah Hashem is in Galus, the Shekhinah is in Galus, we're in Galus, our service is in Galus. How much darker could it get? Yes, one day we will, when Mashiach comes, we will say, as the prophet says, Odcha Hashem ki anaftabi. I'm going to thank you, Hashem, for you have afflicted me. When Mashiach will come. But now, we can't be, Hashem doesn't give us the ability to reason and to understand this. Why? So we won't be comfortable with it. So we will, because if we would understand right now the benefits of all this turbulations and this suffering, we would never want to stop it.
Right.
It's like lahavdil, those gym freaks. Sorry, get my DD.
Fine, we're all here.
I'm sorry.
You can say whatever you want.
There's people who spend a lot of time in the gym. Sometimes to their detriment. How do you gauge if you're working out? The pain. The pain. The amount of pain that the shredding. You're shredding the fibers of your muscle. But the more pain, the more gain. So they never want to leave because if I push myself just a drop more. In the same vein, just, I don't know, like whatever, this is a mushal. In the same vein, if we would understand the benefits of the trials and tribulations, we wouldn't ever want to leave here. But that's why Hashem doesn't equip us with the ability to really understand this. So we won't come to terms with it. So we'll scream to Hashem ad Masai. Until when? Mashiach now. But nevertheless, the Rebbe was crying and says, it's going to come a time when we will be thanking Hashem for this. Just when I watch this, it's very hard for me to I really understand what the Rebbe is saying there. This is 1983. The Rebbe is saying this in 770 in Tishrei, 2 days before, a day before Shmini Atzeret, where they're going to be doing covers, Simchat Torah, the Rebbe Simchat Torah, with Reb Mendel dancing and all the Hasidim dancing over there, and Reb Mendel will bring all night long, the entire week, every single night. And you could just walk in, and you don't have to look on YouTube and Google. You sit there, and Mendel will look at you and and I'm thinking to myself, what darkness? What darkness is there? That's for me like an atomic bomb of a light. It's hard to fathom.
It is.
Right.
Compared to this.
They compared to what's now.
Yeah, this is this is darkness of dark. This is darkness of dark.
I don't know how dark it is.
Well, we certainly, what the Baal Shem Tov says, regarding what it says in Parshas Vayelech, that Hashem says, when the Galut will be marked, when I will conceal my face from them. So the Baal Shem Tov explains, what's the double concealment here? The Baal Shem Tov explains that there's concealment, and there's a concealment that's multiplied unto itself. What's the difference? Concealment in its own right is just an obscurity, darkness. But you are aware you're darkness. While the concealment multiplied unto itself is such a darkness that we start thinking that this is light, that this is normal. What's the problem? What's the problem? There's no Shabbat, no kosher, no this, no... What's the problem? It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all good. I remember I was once driving from Connecticut. I didn't realize the traffic. It was one of my first months over there when I was Mashgiach. We were coming back and it was me, my wife, and my oldest son who was a baby, and 2 pounds of cold cuts and some water. And Baruch Hashem, that was our Shabbos meal, because we left with what I thought was with enough time, 3.5 hours. I didn't take into consideration the rush hour could be that much. Mm-hmm. And so we were still past the Whitestone. We needed to get to Flatbush in Brooklyn 30 minutes before Shabbos. And then we made it to the Whitestone a minute before Shabbos, like 2 minutes before Shabbos. I ran in, threw cash at her. It says, give us a room. Luckily she was Israeli, so she knew. She processed everything. But anyway, on the way there, I was like trying to cut, weave in and out of traffic. And when I saw there's no weaving out, I decided to take the crazy route, the shoulder. Mm-hmm. And truckers don't like when you do that. People they're like, stop.
A lot of people don't like
they don't.
A lot of people don't like it.
Well,
It is what it is.
but I'm like, we're driving, and we're listen, I have a baby in the back.
Right.
I have a baby, and we have 3 pounds of cold cut, 2 pounds of cold cuts and water, and that's it. That's all we have to eat for the next 27 hours, whatever it is.
Maybe.
So I'm like trying maneuver, and then as I'm driving on, and I finally get across to the shoulder once again, there's a guy in a convertible, and he's like, "You're not allowed to drive there." And my wife screams, "We're Orthodox Jews. We have the Sabbath, and we can't drive soon." And he responds back, "I'm Jewish too. Don't worry. God will understand." Yeah, so you think it is okay, darkness is, it's all the same, it's all the same. That's a gullus. We've hit gullus where the craziness is the norm now. And if you don't want to be crazy, you're insane.
You're insane, yeah.
You're the insane one. Okay. Sometimes we think erroneously that the conditions that I find myself in right now don't allow me to bring myself in the situation to Geula. In other words, if it wasn't for this one or that one or this one, for sure I could do. But this is obstructing me. I can't. This is too much. I can't grow. I can't develop. Rabbi Akiva is teaching us that if around us we are noticing a chorban, a destruction, and the Holy of Holies is now not only destroyed, but there are foxes walking through it, you should know full well that right now is your opportunity for Geula. As we learned before, we're coming up to the Parsha next week where the Shema is taken from, and it says, "V'ahavta eis Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha." You should love Hashem your Lord with all of your heart. As we learned, the Sifri, and Rashi brings this. The Sifri is one of the halachic midrashim. Before the Mishnah, there was a Sifri to the book of Dvarim. So the Sifri explains what it means, "V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha." You should love Hashem with all your heart. So he says, the Sifri says, "Shelo yilibcha chaluk al makom," that your heart should not be divisive over Hashem. But it's very interesting because the word for Hashem that the Sifri chooses to use is a word that many times is used throughout the Tanakh. Hamakom, through the rabbinic, through the Gemara and so on and so forth, and the Midrashim. Instead of saying Hashem, there's a euphemism, Hamakom, the place. Many times there's a euphemism. Instead of using the word Hashem, they say the place. For example, like God forbid, when one is sitting Shiva and they're comforted, in our minhag we say Hamakom yenachem etchem. The place will comfort you. Hashem will comfort you. Why do we call him the place? Because hu mekomo shel olam v'lo ha'olam mekomo. Because he is within the space of the world, but the world is not within space. So the Sifri says, when v'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, you should love Hashem your Lord with all of your heart. Don't be divisive over Hashem. But the word Hashem is makom. The Toldot Beit Aharon, the fourth Kalina Rebbe, explains what does that mean. Why the uses of a makom over here? We know that the verbiage is exact. Lo yeh libcha chaluk al makom. Your heart should not be divisive over the place that Hashem put you. Don't be divisive. Don't contend. When Hashem put you in a place, don't be divisive. Oh, this one or that one, he or she and them and that one and this happened and this. Then you don't love God. Then you're not aligned with Hashem. You're not one with Him. There is an ego that is outstanding, that is viewing reality from a separate lens than the godly soul does. And therefore, to love Hashem means this is where you put me. This is where my mission is. We learned this several weeks ago in a meditation class. The Mishnah says, Al tadun et chavercha at shetagia limkomo. Don't judge your friend until you reach his place. Shema mekomo garamlo. So perhaps his place, his setting, is what caused him to sin, to fall out like this. In other words, and the Alter Rebbe elaborates in the Tanya, you might be a very holy person with a very cold temperament, and you have the privilege of sitting all day in Beis Midrash, learning and davening, and therefore you're in a holy setting with a holy mindset and a cold temperament. You don't get excited about external things. But this one, he is in the marketplace. He's in the shuk all day, dealing with all kinds of craziness, and he's exposed to all kinds of elements. And he might have a yetzer hara as burning as a furnace. Mm-hmm. You don't know. Anyway, we could understand this from a deeper place. Mekomo, don't judge your fellow until you got to his place. Perhaps his place caused him. What does it mean, his place? Mekom is Hashem. Don't judge a person until you have the same relationship with Hashem that he does. The same type of expectations that Hashem has from him. Because it's his relationship with Hashem that brought him to this point. In other words, even if you see somebody wallowing in negativity, and you see someone who is experiencing, God forbid, a deficiency of some sort, don't judge. You don't know. You haven't experienced. And why have you experienced? And even if no, I went through this. You went through this. You might have a different temperament. And Hashem didn't activate all the options with you. He gave you the tempered package. He didn't give you the family package. He gave you the rainbow package, the one that includes the basic channels. He didn't give you the all-around, the all-inclusive package. You haven't been smacked and beat down by everybody in one shot. Like, you got a smack here and there. But you don't know. You have no idea. You have no idea. But this is how we view reality. If this is where I am, then this is not besides the point. Right now is the very point. And the very fact that this one's smacking and this one's smacking, since when did we become being scared of somebody's smack? One day you're here and you're already afraid of a smack, Mendel says. The Maisa is, those of you who don't know, and Mendel finally comes to America after spending 8 years in Siberia and another year waiting, 2 years waiting to get his visa. This is after years and years of self-sacrifice and the torture in Siberia and everything else. He finally makes it to America. In a Farbrengen. He's sitting in a Farbrengen, and he and his old friend, also from the underground, they're sitting together. And his friend came not too long before him. He made it out of Russia not too long before him. And someone tried to get his attention, his friend's attention. Or Mendel's attention, I think. And they like sort of went to like this, like sort of like that's like this. But instinctually he moved away. And Mendel says, a few days here and you're already afraid to be smacked. In other words, since when was that a consideration even? Since when? Where are you? Why are you trying to avoid things? This is part and parcel. So we could go back to the Hashgacha Pratit Baal Shem Tov. Even the smacks complete Hashem's intentions for creating the world.
Maybe the smacks are the smacks there to just push you to where.
Either way,
right?
whatever they are, however it is, it has a definitive purpose. Not that we should cut to people, smack me, or enjoy the pain, or excuse it. But when it comes, when it comes, don't get saddened by it. Don't get distraught by it. Don't say, how come, how many times, and what else? And no, you shouldn't look for it. But if it's coming, accept it with happiness. It's easier said than done, I realize that.
Yeah. So just don't excuse it, but just accept what happens.
Accept that it is there, as Rabbi Kiva is teaching us, for greater growth.
Greater good.
In other words, don't translate as something is wrong here. Because the more we are translating, the more we tell ourselves, the more we cry, we're doubling down our mind. Yes, something is wrong. Send more cortisol. Send more, please send more cortisol. We're almost out of cortisol. I'm almost out of tears. I need more. I need more reason to cry. For what? For what? How is that helping? How is it helping you and how is it helping anyone? Just the opposite. It could be said it's only prolonging it and only intensifying it. Yeah. There's a Maisa, there's a story from the very famous Mashpia, Elimelech Biderman. Several years ago, there was the collapse in Meron on Shimon Bar Yochai's Hilula. And there were, unfortunately, many casualties and injuries. He told the story that somebody told him, it happened to him. There was a certain Jew he's sofer, he's scribe, writes Sefer Torahs and mezuzot. And when the scribe came to Menachem Avel to comfort one of the families whose son passed away. They told him they requested from him, I should say, that they would be very happy if he would take upon himself a resolution in honor of their son's Aliyat Neshama. An extra measure of being careful for a mitzvah. And when he asked, what do you have in mind? He says, well, our son was very, very careful in saying bracha, achona, the last blessings, or al michya, one of the, for the mezonot, on how much more so, birkat hamazon, either from a siddur or a bencher. We know these brachos by heart, but the Rebbe, if you ever seen in the conclusion for Brennan, the Rebbe always opened up the Siddur, even for the Borei Nefashot, which is 2 lines, to read from this, to read from the Siddur. So he says, if you can take this resolution, because we know these brachos by even benching, you know the entire thing by heart, you don't need to look. By there, parenthetically, once, a young child, I believe he was 7 or 8 years old, wrote to the Rebbe that he recently took a decision, a resolution to start saying morning blessings from the Siddur. Because morning blessings we also know by heart. But he recently started saying it directly from the Siddur. Because the Rebbe always does it out of the Siddur. So the Rebbe responded back, and I saw this letter. Your letter to me, the Rebbe writes, was like cold water on a tired, hot face on a hot day.
Mm-hmm. That's the place.
So anyway, that's what they asked him. They asked if you could take this. Okay, he decided immediately he's going to take this. Not too far away from where the family lived, the place where he worked, writing the mezuzot and the Torah. He came to, I guess, what was it called? I don't know how else to call it. About an hour into his workday, he gets a phone call, and on the other line there was someone who wanted to have a Sefer Torah written on behalf of one of their relative who has recently passed away. There's such a thing to write a Sefer Torah for somebody who passed away, God forbid. And they asked him to see they said he was recommended, and they asked to see his handwriting style. And he immediately brought it to them. They liked it, but he says, it's not that, it's fancy. The finish is not that. Okay. He was very distraught. Not only did they didn't order the Sefer Torah by him, but this is his profession. Mm-hmm. To say that, it's not that good. Right. When this is who you are and what you love doing, it's like, you're okay with that. He was like shattered. For a while, he's sitting there, really in his mind, he's like really, it's like second guessing himself. But then he started feeling like some of our stomachs have been growling the last while. Hungry. He starts getting hungry. And he decides he's going to eat. He gets up, makes Netilas Yadayim, makes hamotzi. And once he's finished, he remembered, I took upon myself the achlata, the resolution to bench from a bencher. So he starts looking for a bencher and he can't find. Because he usually doesn't bench from a bencher and he's over there. He knows that benching by heart. But as he's searching, he comes across a olding bencher, which was written, the entire bencher was written by a sofer. In the same letters of the Sefer Torah. And their writing was truly magnificent. He was like, wow, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. So he starts sitting there and starts copying, learning how to emulating this style of writing. Hour and hour, he's just sitting there emulating how to write. This is a very precise craft. If anybody thinks this is easy. This is not just calligraphy. There's many laws that applies. How to write, and what if you made a mistake, and there's so many laws. The spacing has to be exact, the lettering has to be everything, the crown. So he takes, and he's hour after hour, and he is interrupted by a phone call. Who's on the other line? Someone who decided to write a Sefer Torah on behalf of all of the casualties in the Meron tragedy. They got together and decided we're going to write one Sefer Torah for all of them. And they asked, could we see your writing style? So he brought what he just worked on. And they were so impressed. He says, yes, we want you immediately. He was so taken aback. The very same day that he decided, that he took upon himself the resolution of benching from a bencher, and had that phone call gone through and said, and if that thing, he would have just started with them and he would have not come back to the office. But the very fact that he was rejected, but that prefaced by his resolution, and that he needed a bench, Hashem already put the solution to his dilemma already next to him, and put the impetus to get to that already. Not only he wrote it for someone, but it brought out a whole different style of writing that he never even knew he could. And then it was written for many neshamot. This means how we transform the Galus into Geula. We don't wallow in the negativity. We don't wallow in the sadness. That's not what the Rebbe teaches us. If you will look at the Rebbe's style of leadership, as we spoke about many times, the Rebbe assumed leadership within 1951. It was not too long after, I believe it was Time magazine, whose front page article was, or front page title was, Judaism is something about to go extinct. Judaism has 5 years left, something to that extent. Because naturally, the Holocaust. Then there's Russia. So most of European Jews were decimated. Then Russia is still going, communism going on. Russia was still going on. Like communism was, murdering people left and right and discriminating until 1990. And in America, there was a great assimilation. That was it. It didn't look like anything. Like Hitler, the Machman was asked, do you really plan to wipe every single Jew in the fight? You think you could get to American Jewry? He says, no, I don't need to get to American Jewry. The soul of Judaism is European Jewry. The American Jews are cold and disconnected. Mm-hmm. If we do away with the European Jews, they will already fall by the wayside. The Rebbe assumed leadership right then to how many? Two handful of Chassidim. A lot of Chassidim were still in Russia. Into the cold desert of America. Or even if Chassidim of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, out of the 4 periods of my leadership, the hardest period was the period of America. Because in America, Chassidim try to tell the Rebbe what to do. How did the Rebbe lead? Did he wallow? We have to shut down. We have to insulate ourselves. Don't just the opposite. You have to go out with simcha. The Rebbe taught many times, the niggun, Ki v'simcha seitzeu v'shalom tuvalun hey yarim hey yavos. It's from the prophet. You will for in happiness you will go out and you'll be led in with harmony, etc., etc. Hey harim ve'hagvos, the mountains and the hills will start singing for you, Rina. They will start crooning for you. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The Rebbe taught this to mean, if you want to go out of your dire straits, ki v'simcha tetzeu, for you'll come out in happiness. You want to come out of whatever dire straits, it's with happiness. It's not with sadness. It's not with despondency. It's not with shame or guilt or blaming or anything. It doesn't matter who smacked you and for what reason they're smacking you. You want to come out? It's not with tears. It's with happiness. Because if you're wallowing the tears, you didn't get the message yet, then you have to keep on going through it until you do. You're intensifying it for no reason. Move forward. Geh weiter. You know why we love Johnny Walker in Chabad? Because they're simple. Because their motto, keep walking. Just keep going. Reb Mendel had a very famous aphorism with this. It says, if you ever been to Kaparot in anywhere, I don't know, anywhere. Kaparot. If you ever seen this also, I've seen this in Crown Heights. 5 a.m, that's where we do it. You come it could be raining, it could be, you got all your children, and then you could be pooped on by the chicken. So Mendel says, and what happens? Now, the last 2 years, they have these big, how do you say this? These big pages, staying up with all the prayers. So you don't have to, you could actually look at it like a normal human being. But otherwise, usually you have to find a page, one of those, they make tons of these prints, they're all over, and some have poop on it, whatever. It's an experience of it itself. You have to see the eyes of the police officers who are preventing. They look at us like barbarians, forget about PETA, they come, they're watching us like cruel people, and this and that and that. I love debating with these people. It's okay. It's not okay here, but you're able to murder lettuce indiscriminately. So that's okay. But so Reb Mendel says back in the day. So what happens? If back in the day you didn't even have a paper where you could basically one sheet. You would have to hold the entire siddur in your left hand, which is not easy. Okay, and your chicken, which is you're trying not to be cruel to this chicken. You're trying to do stuff, but this chicken could and then out of nowhere, it just poops on you. So your one hand is occupied with a book, and the other one is a chicken. What do you do now? And Mendel says, what do you do now? Says, what did this person do? It says, there was a person who was standing at Crown Heights, and the chicken walked on him, as he do kaparas. One hand is a siddur, the other one is a chicken, and it pooped on him. What did he do? And Mendel said, I don't know what I can't tell you what he did, but I can tell you one thing, he's not there now. You gotta keep on going, geh weiter, keep moving, keep walking.
He's not there.
Life could poop on you.
What were you withholding this story for so long?
Everything has a time and space. I don't know why. Did we say about the... Well, I need to get this exact, because I only heard it twice. And Mendel and Farbrengen was told there was a bird. I think I got the details correct. But if I'm not, I know exactly where to get it. Mordechai Yagubian is the one that told me this Maisa. He says there was a flock of birds who were about to take their annual migration to the south. There's one sort of a Hasidic bird who over for bringing the night before. And like all the other ones, like there, Miss Knock didn't wake up on time. 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock, and they're like, okay, we're going, we're packed, we're leaving. And this guy, he just wakes up like 10 in the morning. He's like, okay, he's like, okay, I'm ready, and like nobody's around, and he has to take the journey by himself. But they fly together, and they have a unique formation because they have a direction they need to go to, and that formation also helps shields them from the weather and so on and so forth. But this particular bird goes by himself, and he hit some pretty rough weather. And the turbulence makes him crash to the ground, and he's all wet. He's all wet, and he is freezing. And he freezes, and he becomes a solid block of ice. But he's still alive. A fox comes around, sniffs around, but he can't smell it because it's frozen. But then a horse comes and stands by him, by the bird, and poops on him. And the horse poop is warm.
Melted.
So it's melting. And it's, finally some nice warmth, and it's thank you. But then a dog comes and starts licking him and cleans him off. And he says, I get to be warm and a shower. Wow, I'm so lucky. But then, now that he is clean, the fox could smell him, and he eats him. And Mendel says, not everybody who's pooping on you is something negative, and not anyone who's kissing you is doing positive.
Yeah.
Know the context. I have to say it's better, but that's the nakuda. That's the nakuda. We have to see it for what it is. We have to see reality for what it is. Not every poop is bad. Not every time somebody smacks us. Just keep going. Geh weiter. Keep walking. Let's move forward. Why did he laugh? The Rebbe goes even deeper. Why did he laugh? What makes an anecdote, a joke, funny?
Well, there is like a logic, but then this logic breaks, makes it more logical.
Right, because it's telling you a story, it's leading you on, but then there's a punchline that completely is not expected. Like when somebody is when somebody is telling you to do something impossible, what do you usually say? What, are you joking?
Right.
In other words, this would be impossible from this place where I am. It doesn't even make sense.
Right.
When Hashem tells Sarah that you're going to give birth, she laughed. Why is Yitzchak's name Yitzchak? Because she laughed. It's like, what am I, 100 years, 90 years old, I'm going to start pushing a wagon? Well, that doesn't make sense. Some commentators explain this was a deficiency. Some explain that it shows the lack of emunah. Some explain just the opposite. It's because it's so unforeseen, according to the current conditions, that this is such a twist and a shocking twist to the plot that you gotta laugh.
Right, so true.
This is what Rabbi Akiva is laughing about. He says that when you see the fox coming out from the place of the Holy of Holies, this is such a difficult sight to bestow, to see. But Rabbi Akiva's deep perspective into reality saw the twist at the end.
Yeah.
He says that in the depth of the matter, The fox in itself is part of the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. That the lower it went, as we said in part 1, that's as intense as it's going to be. So it's not besides the point. This is the most unexpected twist possible, that from such destruction will hit the sea of the seas. To the point we'll be thanking God day after day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for Hashem, for all of you done to us. Like I could tell you, when I was working for Mrs. Kazin, oh boy, Mrs. Kazin, where Rabbi David was chesed, his cousin was the epitome of Gura. General Kazin, the queen of Cleveland. You want to read a book about heroism, about what a woman, the strength of a woman. The Queen of Cleveland is an amazing book. A book about Mrs. Kazin. Such a powerful book. Details her early life, her mother Mariasha, and her father Chonya Shalgalov. I lent you the book of Chonya, struggle, what's the name? Chonya's. No, I gave you Kitchi Demasmi's book. I need to give you Chonya's book.
Yeah, that's what you gave. Like me, then.
I remember with her, before I took the job, my mom was already very close to that family because my mom made tshuva with that family. And she's still friends with the daughters. They brought her out to Cleveland to speak several times, and way before, when I was still a little kid, I was like 13, whatever. But when I took that job with Mrs. Kazin, my mom tells me, and by the way, I mentioned that I was hired to go to Ulyanovsk, which is a city where Lenin was born. Berlazar, I met him, and he knows my family very well. He knows my dad, so he's like, "Hey, you need a place? It's open." Then the shliach from Berdichev, Rabbi Shmuel Plotkin, met me and says, "I have a shlichus for you to go to Berdichev, be the Rav of Berdichev, the shliach of Berdichev." For me, that was so enticing. To be Berdichev, a shliach of Berdichev, for me. And then there was Ojai, California. Ojai, California, man.
Imagine.
Ojai, California. That place is pitch. To say the weather is picturesque. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Thank you.
But I was hired. Someone couldn't hire me. Berdichev and Ulyanovsk, both my wife couldn't do. It was too much. Russian winters and just going to Russia, like it was too much. Ojai was something we both agreed was beautiful, amazing. Rabbi Kunin told us when we were there, when you come back, go to the Ohel, write to the Rebbe that you accepted this position, and you have to fundraise $70,000 for your first year's salary, and you could come. I said, okay. I was thinking, how am I going to I never fundraised before, like suddenly that kind of money. So, okay. The next morning, Mrs. Kazin shows up in my front door with her daughter, Rivka Kotlarski. Because my mother mentioned to her, and she brought us out to Cleveland for a trial, and I was like, this is not for me. This is so not for me. It has nothing to do with me. I don't want to be here. And then when I looked at Ohio, I was like, yeah, I made the right choice. It's definitely not for me. But the morning we're supposed to go to the Ohel, she shows up in my living room, in front of my door, and that's how she was. She was very blunt and forward. She's like, so why don't you take that position? I didn't want to tell her it's not for me, but I was like, listen, I'll be honest with you, this, that. She's like, no, you got to come to us. I was like, why? He's like, no, you have to come. And she was like sitting there for an hour, convincing me and my wife that we have to come. I was like, how do I get out of this? I wanted the beautiful weather. Well, only thing I know about Ohio that, aside from what I saw I didn't like, that I felt it's not a position I wanted to be like doing this and that, but it was freezing. I knew about the winters. And here's summer, and I hate the cold. But she convinced us, and instead of Ohio, we added the O. Ohio, oh. And boy, and then she made this discrepancy. We're like, okay, so we're going to come there, look for a place, and then she said, no, you don't looking for a place. You're going to live on our second floor, on top of us. I was like, no, we don't want to live. We don't want to live in the Jewish area. This used to be the Jewish area, but now it's the not Jewish area, to put it mildly. Just like in the middle of the projects now. And everybody says, you don't want to live there. Trust me, you don't live, because you'll be in proximity to her and she could be demanding. And so I was like, we don't want to move. It says, Mrs. Kazin, with all due respect, thank you very much. We don't want to come there to be a house. I say, if you don't live by us, you can't come here at all. And I try to give a reasoning. My children need to have friends. No, he says, sometimes having the Jewish friends is a bad thing. As opposed to have no friends. Because if the Jewish friend, and she was right, by the way, if the Jewish friend might be off, then they're Jewish, and they're doing this anyway, so I could do it too.
Wow.
Let me tell you, living on top of Mrs. Kazin was a whole... I got to tell you, some of the things that she did infuriated me. I mean, I lost it on her several times. I raised my voice because some of them, like Mayor, just one day, my son Mayor decided one time he loved animals and he was an explorer from the time he was 3 years old. One day, he was about 5, 6 years old, something like that, 7 years. He disappeared. Shabbos, the hottest day of the year. Shabbos, he just disappeared. We had no idea where he went. And when I finally found him, all the way down next to the shul, he walked by himself back to the shul because he saw a caterpillar or something, and he decided he went. And later on, I asked him what happened. He says, I came back, and Mrs. Kazin told me I could go again.
No way.
I was and he came back beet red. And I was like, why would you tell him this? And there was other things. Everything, I was like infuriated. They call me the Korban Pesach. The shul called me the Korban Pesach. She's like, well, you don't know why you were chosen to be the Korban Pesach, but you were chosen. But nobody comes here for nothing.
It made you who you are now.
And afterwards, afterwards did I thank her profusely. Profusely. To say that she had unconventional methods, if I say it borders abuse at some point. But this was extreme gvura that cleans so quickly, that raises so much. And afterwards, I'm till this day, every one of us, even the children, and we're all thankful to her. I had the merit of thanking her so many times when we moved back over here. She moved back over here. I brought my Silverstein students over to her to get blessings. Like you see, the Aronoviches, they're all from today because she gave them brachas. Wow. I brought them before Rosh Hashanah. We went to the Rebbe's room, and on the way we stopped by her house, and she gave them all candy, and she gave them brachas, chassidim, and this. And
when did she pass away?
Several years ago. The gvura doesn't mean it's bad. It means it's raising you to a whole different level. We'll continue this next time.